Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to direct my question to Mr. Silvertooth and Mr. Johnson, and this has to do a little bit with the Strive Act. That is our centerpiece legislation on immigration reform in the House, and it covers many areas, including the new worker program. There are triggers in the bill, and you're probably both familiar with these triggers. I wanted to, and the Department of Homeland Security, it states that the Department of Homeland Security may not implement the new worker and legalization programs until it completes a certification process. Can you explain these triggers in the Strive Act, and do you think these triggers prevent or unreasonably delay the implementation of legalization or new worker programs? And you may also, some other folks on the panel may have some thoughts around this.
The inclusion of triggers, I think, is probably important from a political standpoint in order to build the political will within Congress to make sure that we can get comprehensive reform. At the same time, we are strong believers that there needs to be four legs on this stool. There's got to be border enforcement, there has to be interior enforcement, there has to be some type of future flow program so we're not sitting at this table again 20 years from now scratching our heads wondering what we did wrong in immigration reform. And there needs to be some type of transition to some type of legal status for those that are currently here in an undocumented capacity. If we do something short of that, if we put these triggers out there and we start enforcing first, there needs to be a transition protection for those workers that are currently in the economy, and there needs to be transition protection for those businesses that are using those workers currently, because they're grappling with an imperfect system, and it would be unreasonable to start enforcing on them for a failed status quo. So that would be my comments.
Yeah. Since we don't lobby on legislation, maybe I'm not as constrained by the politics of this issue, but I'm troubled by the idea because you don't see it in any other context, right? We don't say that we're going to wait to make sure there's no more tax fraud before we reform our tax system, or no more health care fraud until we reform our health care system. And in the immigration context, the key to getting control of the borders is dealing with one of the root causes of undocumented immigration, which is this sort of schizophrenia that we have at our border, the fact that our economy hangs up a help wanted sign and that our immigration system hangs up a keep out sign. And an effective border enforcement policy has to confront the sort of disconnect that we have between our economic policies and our immigration policies. Otherwise, the prospects of gaining control over the border is going to be enormously expensive. We have in the last 10 years quintupled the amount of money we spend on border enforcement, tripled the size of our border patrol departments, and the results is we have more undocumented immigration, more deaths at the border, a huge growth in the business of human smuggling. So the fact that we are trying to, that part of the enemy here is our own economic demand makes the costs of fighting ourselves much, much more expensive than it has to be. I don't see any reason why you can't do both. You need smarter, more effective enforcement. But part of the way that we gain control of the borders is making sure that we have a system that's responsive to the family and employment demands that we have in our economy.
You wanted to comment?
Yes, I would just like to add, on behalf of the agricultural community, along with the comments that Mr. Silvertooth made, is that the Strive bill is fine for us, except the main problem is the triggers. Agriculture can't wait for the programs to be implemented. We're in a crisis situation right now, and the agricultural community recognized this over 10 years ago and started addressing the issue, and we need to have some type of program that works for us now, and we can't wait. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Clark. I can't comment on the internal politics within Congress, but the reason the trigger idea is introduced, and I'm somewhat dubious of it, but the reason it's there is because no one believes the new rules will be enforced, and with very good reason. 1986, the deal was a grand bargain. Prohibition of the employment of illegal immigrants for the first time ever in exchange for, as it were, tying up the loose ends, legalizing the illegals who were here. The amnesty part of it came up front. The promises of enforcement were to come in the future. They were abandoned. And no one believes, and I mean, I think the public largely doesn't believe either, that new bodies of rules will be enforced. And in a sense, the sense is, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, shame on me. And that's why a trigger requirement is attractive to a lot of people, because it makes sure that the enforcement happens first, at least some of it, before the legalization follows.
Thank you. Mr. Sestak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had two questions. Mr. Krikorian, when you did your analysis of on the 11% and 13%, when you went back to the 1800s and looked at the percentages for the immigrants then and their entrepreneurship as compared to today, as compared to the population then, what were the percentages?
We did, and I'm pretty sure the reason for that is the Census Bureau doesn't
What do you think
keep
it
those
was?
kind of. I have no idea. Probably
how far
was-
back did you go?
Well,
I
we
mean,
didn't-
is
we-
this
we just
statistically,
looked at the
if I
past.
could, is this statistically important, the 11 and 13%? I mean, if you went back 50, 60, 80 years, I mean, that just might be what things are. 11% now, and 3 decades from now, all of a sudden you have, Standard and Oil. Entrepreneur. I mean, is it really significant what you're telling us if you can't go back and say, what is the reference for it?
No, I understand. We actually went from 1970, 80, 90.
No, I know that, but
2000.
I'm trying to get back to, maybe the last great wave of immigration.
I understand.
The Irish or, something like that.
Those
Because we come in waves.
nobody asked number one back then.
It'd be very interesting to know, because you're saying these statistics are important, but I don't have any reference for them. 11 and 13% compared to the last great wave of immigration. I'd love to see, because I would think coming in here and just getting a job, you're probably coming here to make sure your kids can eat, and somewhat you're more risk averse if that's the case. You kind of get going and steady them out a bit, and then maybe the entrepreneurship comes. I have a question for you, Mr. Rector. I was really taken by your comments about how you need to do this holistically. Remember the last comment you made? If you really do your analysis holistically, as I listen to these hearsay, and those those people who can't put as much into the system, as you say, aren't put as much in the system, if they're removed, they disappear with a magic wand, what is the cost attendant to this nation's economy? If I could. In other words, if you really do want to do a holistic analysis, what are the benefits that accrue from having them here to the quality of our lives, a non-leaky roof? I mean, and the taxes attendant to being able to have a farmer produce more fruit. What did your analysis show for that?
My analysis doesn't cover that, but I can answer that.
But if we do have to do holistic, shouldn't we do that?
If you jerk them all out of the economy tomorrow, you would have a big shock effect. But let's look at it in another way. If you look at the flow of illegals that we currently have coming in, we're probably going to bring an additional 7 million low-skill illegals in under the status quo.
If I could interrupt for a moment. You took a snapshot. It wasn't a fluid or dynamic situation. And just a moment. And you presented it here as something very important, this snapshot, and emphasized it was to be seen in a holistic way. If you take that snapshot today and look at the benefits, forget the cost and disappearing, potentially that was the wrong way to ask it, but you look at the benefits that accrue to us from more taxes paid into the system, from growing businesses and things like that. What does your analysis show for that? And if that's not done, why not do that? Shouldn't that give us the holistic cost-benefit analysis?
I do have all the taxes paid in this system.
From the businesses? In other words,